Him out of here, Patrice. He's confused. Wrong floor, wrong building, wrong decade. That was my son-in-law's voice. I recognized it the moment I stepped off the elevator into the 32nd floor of his firm's downtown Toronto office. He was standing maybe 15 feet away, surrounded by 3 colleagues in matching charcoal suits, and he was laughing. Not a nervous laugh, a performative one, the kind you make when you want an audience to know you're in charge. I was wearing my old Stanfield's flannel, the tan Carhartt jacket I've had since 2009, and my regular work boots. I'd driven in from Barrie that morning and hadn't thought much about what I was wearing. I never do. The receptionist, Patrice, apparently, looked between us with the particular discomfort of someone who knows something her boss doesn't. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I just stood there and looked at him. His name is Cody. He married my daughter 6 years ago in a backyard ceremony in Orangeville, and I paid for most of it. I remember standing there watching him take her hand and thinking he seemed like a solid kid. Ambitious, maybe a little too eager to impress, but solid. I gave him the benefit of the doubt for a long time, longer than I should have. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years building a commercial refrigeration company out of a 2-bay garage in Innisfil, Ontario. We started with 1 truck and a contract to service the walk-in coolers at a chain of grocery stores in Simcoe County. By the time I sold the company 8 years ago, we had 42 employees, contracts across 4 provinces, and a reputation I was genuinely proud of. I didn't make headlines. I didn't go on podcasts. I drove a 2011 F-150 for 11 years because it ran fine and I didn't see the point of replacing it. After the sale, I bought a piece of lakefront property near Oromodonte, fixed up the old farmhouse that came with it, and started taking life slower. I still consult a little here and there. Old clients call when they have a problem, but mostly I fish, I split wood, I watch my grandchildren grow up. I have 2 kids. My son lives in Calgary and calls every Sunday. My daughter, I'll call her my daughter, because that's who she is to me in every way that matters, lives in Mississauga with Cody and their 2 boys. The boys are 7 and 9. Good kids. Curious, a little loud. Exactly what boys that age should be. About 14 months ago, I drove down to Mississauga for a long weekend. Unannounced, which I know isn't always ideal, but my daughter had always said the door was open. Cody was away at a conference in Vancouver. I pulled into the driveway around noon on a Friday, knocked, and my daughter answered looking like she hadn't slept in 2 days. The house was fine on the surface, but when I came inside and the boys ran down from upstairs to see me, I noticed things. The younger one had a winter coat that was genuinely too small. The sleeves came halfway up his forearms. The older one's running shoes had a split along the left toe that someone had tried to fix with electrical tape. My daughter's phone had a cracked screen she'd been living with for months. I didn't say anything right away. I took them all out for lunch at Swiss Chalet, bought the boys new coats and shoes at Sport Check that afternoon, and on Saturday morning, while the kids watched cartoons and my daughter slept in for the first time in what seemed like weeks, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and thought about what I was seeing. Cody was a wealth management advisor at a mid-sized investment firm in downtown Toronto. He'd been in the industry for 9 years. The kind of work where your income scales with your book of business. When he and my daughter got married, he was making decent money. In the years since, he'd told us, at dinners, at Christmas, and offhand comments, that he was doing very well. Better every year. But my daughter's boys were wearing split shoes and hand-me-down coats. That discrepancy sat in my stomach like a cold stone. I drove back to Barrie that Sunday and started paying closer attention. Not in an accusatory way. Not yet. I just started noticing. Over the next 2 months, I found reasons to visit Mississauga 4 times. Each time, Cody happened to be away, or working late, or otherwise not present. That struck me as its own kind of information. I started talking to my daughter more directly, not interrogating her, just leaving space for her to say something if she wanted to. She didn't. Not at first. But there was something in the way she'd change the subject when Cody's schedule came up. Something in the way she'd go quiet when I mentioned money. That told me she was protecting something. Or someone. I'm old enough and stubborn enough that when something doesn't add up, I follow the numbers. I have an accountant I've used for over 2 decades, a man named Stewart, quiet and meticulous, the kind of man who notices when a decimal is off by a cent. I asked Stewart to help me understand something. I knew from my daughter mentioning it years ago that Cody had refinanced the Mississauga house. I knew from listening at family dinners the rough size of his book of business. What I wanted to know was whether the picture added up. Stewart spent 3 weeks looking at what was publicly available: corporate filings, property records, anything that didn't require a warrant. What he found wasn't illegal. But it was clarifying. Cody had incorporated a numbered company 2 years earlier. He'd taken out a line of credit on the house without my daughter's signature, which was worth noting. He was driving a leased BMW 7 Series. He had season tickets to the Leafs. He had what appeared to be a second property, a condo registered to the numbered company in the Liberty Village area of Toronto. I sat with that information for a long time. The condo was the part that bothered me most. Not because of the money, because of what a condo like that, registered to a shell company in a Toronto neighborhood full of restaurants and bars and young professionals, tends to mean. I hired a private investigator. Her name is not important. She came highly recommended by a former client of mine who'd had reason to use her services. She was professional, discreet, and she completed her work in 3 weeks. She confirmed what I suspected. Cody had been involved with another woman for at least 18 months. She was younger, worked in marketing, had no idea, as far as the investigator could determine, that he was married with children. The condo was where he spent his Tuesday and Thursday evenings, and the occasional weekend when he told my daughter he was at conferences. I made copies of everything. I gave them to my lawyer, a man I've known since my company's early days, careful and thorough, and I asked him to review what options existed. Then, I did something I perhaps should have done differently. I called Cody and told him I needed to meet him at his office. I said it was about a financial matter I wanted his professional advice on. I kept my voice neutral. I told him I was thinking about restructuring how some of my assets were managed and wanted to talk through options. He said, sure. He said he'd love that, actually. He said, come by next Thursday at 2. I don't know what he thought was walking through that elevator door. I don't know whether he'd forgotten what I looked like, or whether he'd just never thought of me as anything other than a retired tradesman from Barrie who happened to be his wife's father. But I do know that the moment he saw me step off that elevator in my Carhartt jacket and my work boots, something shifted in his face. Not recognition, dismissal. Get him out of here, Patrice. He's confused. Wrong floor, wrong building, wrong decade. The colleagues laughed. Patrice looked at the floor. I heard someone near the far windows actually snicker. I put my hands in my pockets and waited. Cody walked toward me then, still performing, lowering his voice just enough to be audible to the people nearest us. Dad, come on. You can't just... You're not dressed for this. You don't have a meeting. This is a professional environment. I have a 2 o'clock, I said. You booked it yourself. He blinked. My name is on the calendar, Cody. Check with Patrice. Patrice, who had clearly already checked, gave a small, precise nod. Mr. Elmsley is confirmed for 2 o'clock. That's my surname. Elmsley. I should have said that earlier. Cody's expression did something complicated. He reset it quickly. He was good at that, I'd noticed, and said, fine, conference room. Brisk, barely civil. He walked ahead of me without holding the door. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the lake. On a clear day in November, you could see the far shore. I sat down. Cody sat across from me and crossed his arms. What is this really about? He said. It's about what I said on the phone. Asset management. How much are we talking? That depends on who's managing it. He uncrossed his arms slightly. I could see him doing the math, deciding whether this was worth his time, trying to determine what category of client his father-in-law might actually be. Ballpark, he said. What are you working with? Just over 4 million in registered accounts. Another 9.5 in non-registered. a commercial property in Barrie that appraised last spring at 2.2, plus the farmhouse in the Oro Medonte land, which I haven't appraised recently. The silence in the room changed quality. Cody's hands were flat on the table now. He was looking at me differently. It wasn't warm. It was calculating, which is almost worse. But the performance had stopped. I didn't know. I mean, you never mentioned. You never asked, I said. You assumed. He started talking then. Fees, portfolio strategy, tax-efficient structures, the firm's proprietary management platform. He was good at his job when he was focused. I'll give him that. I let him talk for about 4 minutes. Then I said, before we go any further, I need to ask you something directly. Of course. How much of the line of credit you took out on the Mississauga house have you drawn down? The silence this time was different. Longer. He went very still. That's a personal matter, he said. It affects my daughter. That makes it my concern. With respect, it really doesn't. The condo on Liberty Village, I said. The one registered to your numbered company. How long has she been living there? He stood up. His chair scraped back and hit the wall. You had someone watching me. I had someone verifying what I already suspected. That is an absolute violation of Cody. My voice came out quiet. Quieter than I felt. Sit down. He didn't sit. But he stopped moving. I have a folder, I said. My lawyer has the original. I have a copy. It details the line of credit, the numbered company, the condo, and 18 months of behavior that your wife does not yet know about. I want you to understand that clearly before we continue this conversation. He sat down. We sat there for a moment in the afternoon light, with the lake behind him and his career in front of him, and everything he'd been managing, the 2 lives, the performance, the careful architecture of it, sitting between us like something that had already collapsed and just hadn't finished falling yet. What do you want? He said. I want my daughter to have access to a family lawyer of her choosing before you or anyone else tells her anything. I want the line of credit frozen pending a fair division of the matrimonial home's equity. And I want you to understand that any attempt to move assets before them will be addressed by my lawyer, who has already drafted the necessary documents. You've had legal advice on this. For 6 weeks. He was quiet for a long time. He looked out the window. He looked at his hands. He looked like a man who had believed he was the smartest person in every room he'd ever been in, and was finding that belief difficult to hold. Does she know? He said. Quieter now. Something that might have been shame, though I couldn't be certain. No, I said. She will, but I wanted to speak to you first. I stood up and put on my jacket. I pushed my chair in. I do that everywhere. Restaurants, boardrooms, people's kitchens. My mother raised me to leave a table the way you'd want to find it. One more thing, I said. I'll be moving my assets to a different firm. I hope you understand. I walked out of the conference room and back through the open floor. Patrice was at her desk. I thanked her as I passed. She looked up, and for a half-second, I thought she was going to say something. She just nodded, but it was a particular kind of nod, the kind that means I already knew something was wrong in here. I took the elevator down and walked out onto Bay Street into the November cold. I stood there for a minute and watched the streetcar go by and thought about my daughter sitting in that house in Mississauga, not knowing what she was about to learn, and about the boys who would need their grandfather to be steady in the weeks ahead. I drove back to Barrie. I stopped at the Tim Hortons on the 400 because I had been awake since 5:30, and the coffee I'd made at the house had worn off 2 hours ago. I sat in the parking lot and drank my medium double-double, and looked at the gray November sky and did not feel triumphant. I felt tired, the way you feel when a long job is finally finished and you're not sure what to do with your hands. I called my daughter that evening. I asked if I could come for the weekend. She said of course. I said I'd be there Saturday morning. She said the boys would be happy. I told her there was something I needed to talk to her about. She went quiet on the phone for a few seconds, and then she said, I think I already know, Dad. I wasn't expecting that. I've known something was wrong for a long time, she said. I just didn't know what to do about it. I told her we'd figure it out together. I told her she wasn't going to go through it alone. I told her the boys were going to be okay. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, very quietly, "He always acted like you were nothing. I hated that." "I know," I said. "You're not nothing, Dad." "I know that too," I said, "but it's nice to hear." The next 4 months were hard. They were hard in the way that real things are hard. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just the grinding, daily work of lawyers and mediators and conversations that go too long, and documents that need to be read twice, and boys who need to be dropped off at school and picked up and fed and told, in age-appropriate language, that sometimes grown-ups make choices that change things, and that it doesn't have anything to do with them. My daughter had her own lawyer. A woman in Brampton. Sharp, practical, no patience for delay tactics. The matrimonial home's equity was divided fairly once someone started paying attention to what was actually in the accounts. Cody fought some of it and conceded the rest. He kept the Liberty Village condo. I expect he's still there. The boys live with my daughter now in a smaller place in Guelph. A good town, solid schools, a backyard. She got full-time work again with a property management company. She's good at it. She always was. I see the boys most weekends I can manage. They've taken to fishing, the older one in particular. He has a patience about him that surprised me at first, but probably shouldn't have. I moved my assets to a different firm as I told Cody I would. The managing partner there called personally to welcome me. He was professional and prepared and did not once comment on my jacket. People ask me sometimes, old colleagues, neighbors, whether I'm angry at Cody, whether I regret not acting sooner, whether I wish things had gone differently. Mostly I tell them the truth, which is that I don't spend much time on regret. I spent 31 years in a business where things broke constantly. Compressors, supply chains, relationships, contracts, and the only useful thing to do when something breaks is figure out what you can fix and start there. My daughter is okay. The boys are okay. That's what I fixed. That's what mattered. The rest of it, the performance, the assumptions, the laughter in that hallway, I don't carry that around. It would be too heavy and it isn't worth the weight. But I will say this. If you are the kind of person who looks at someone and decides based on their jacket or their truck or their age or their quietness that they don't matter, that they can be dismissed, mocked, managed, then you should know that the world is full of people like me. People who built things quietly for 30 years and never needed you to know about it. People who paid attention long after you stopped expecting them to. We don't announce ourselves. We don't have to. I've been thinking about what it actually means to be underestimated. Not the sting of it that passes, but the mechanics of it. Why it happens. What it reveals. Cody looked at me and saw a retired man in a work jacket who'd driven 2 hours from Barrie to bother him at his office. He saw the boots and the flannel and the truck in the parking garage, and he made a decision in about 4 seconds. That decision told me everything I needed to know about him. More than 6 years of Sunday dinners and Christmas visits ever had. The thing is, I never blamed him for not knowing what I'd built. I'd never told him, not out of strategy or secrecy, just because it never came up in a way that felt natural, and I've never been the kind of man who steers conversations toward his own balance sheet. That's not modesty. It's just how I was raised. You do the work. You don't narrate it, but here's what I've come to understand. At 63, after building something and selling it, and watching my family and living long enough to see patterns repeat, the way a person treats you when they think you have nothing to offer them. That's the only honest version of them you'll ever see. Everything else is performance. The charm at the dinner table, the handshake, the interest in your opinions, all of it can be calibrated. But contempt, real contempt, is hard to fake and hard to hide. When Cody laughed in that hallway, he wasn't making a mistake. He was telling the truth. What undid him wasn't my portfolio. I want to be clear about that. If I'd been a retired man with a modest RRSP and a paid-off house in Barrie, His behavior toward my daughter and those boys would still have been wrong. The money was just the instrument that happened to be in my hand when things came to a head. What actually undid him was the accumulation of choices he'd made across years. The hidden credit line, the numbered company, the condo, the Tuesday evenings in Liberty Village, while my daughter managed 2 kids and a cracked phone screen. He built his own consequences one decision at a time. I just helped them arrive on schedule. That's the part people don't always want to sit with. There's no mystery to how lives go sideways. It's usually not one dramatic failure. It's a long series of small ones. Small dishonesties, small disrespects, small shortcuts, each one feeling manageable in the moment, each one making the next one easier to justify. Cody didn't end up where he ended up because I walked into his office. He ended up there because of who he'd chosen to be long before I arrived. What I keep thinking about is Stuart, actually, my accountant. 32 years we've worked together. He spent 3 weeks quietly pulling public records, not because he owed me anything beyond his professional duties, but because he's a thorough man who takes his work seriously. He didn't dramatize it. He handed me a folder and explained what he'd found, and waited for me to tell him what I wanted to do next. That kind of steadiness, the willingness to do careful work without fanfare, is rarer than people think. I've tried to be that kind of person. I'm not always successful, but I try. My daughter is okay. The boys are fishing. The Guelph backyard has a rink in it now, because I built one in November with the older boy helping me pack the boards. He takes that very seriously. I don't need Cody to have learned anything. I don't need a moral to tidy this up. I just know what I saw, and I know what I did, and I know that the people I love are steadier now than they were 14 months ago. That's enough for me.